They didn't see a warrior when she walked in, just a scarred woman with a limp and a recycled uniform. Must have been admin or intel, someone muttered as she passed, her gaze steady beneath the brim of her faded patrol cap. The commanding officer didn't look up when he assigned her to logistics, and the junior troops whispered that her commendations must have been honorary. That morning, they laughed when she was late to formation, her ID badge dangling from a duct-taped lanyard and her boots scuffed raw. No one knew that in a locked storage container inside her duffel sat a bolt carrier group she'd custom milled in Helmand, or that the faint burn mark on her collar was from the day she shielded a lieutenant from an IED. And when they finally opened her field notebook, after the impossible shot, after the silence, what they found were calculations, wind metrics, and kill logs signed off by names they only saw on plaques. One page carried a single line: "When it matters, aim quiet." If you believe that real skill doesn't need applause, that it shows up when everyone else folds, like and subscribe, because this story isn't about noise. It's about a bullet, a moment, and a woman they didn't see coming until it was far too late. Main story. It started the day Staff Sergeant Sarah Blake checked into Forward Base Phoenix, a concrete blister in the middle of nowhere, carved into a windswept basin and surrounded by dust storms that stripped skin raw and buried hope faster. She arrived on foot, pack slung low, wearing an old M81 pattern boonie that no one else seemed to recognize anymore. The fabric was faded from years of sun and sand, bleached almost white in places, with small tears carefully sewn shut with military precision. Her orders were vague, attached as a logistics specialist, no weapons assignment, no fire team role. The clerk who processed her paperwork barely glanced up, stamping forms with mechanical indifference. She barely said a word during in-brief, just nodded, signed with a steady hand, and disappeared into the supply hangar like a ghost no one missed. But if they had looked closer, they might have noticed the way she moved, deliberate, economical, like someone who had learned that wasted motion could mean wasted lives. The outpost was full of noise, yelling, drills, cocky new captains treating the desert like a training field and war like a football scrimmage. The air buzzed with testosterone and bravado, young soldiers trying to prove themselves with every word and gesture. Captain Marcus Thompson was the loudest of them. Tall, clean-cut, born with too much confidence and a voice that cracked through silence like a whip. He strutted between training ranges like he owned the sky, boasting about his kill counts from simulations and goading recruits into side bets over who'd hit the steel first. His uniform was always pressed, his boots polished to mirror shine, and he wore his rank like a crown. When Blake walked past one day with a clipboard and a bandaged knuckle, Thompson sneered loud enough for the group to hear. "Looks like someone got lost between the filing cabinet and the armory." The circle of junior officers laughed on cue, their laughter sharp and cutting in the desert air. They laughed because that's what they did, followed their leader's lead, echoed his confidence, mirrored his disdain. Blake didn't blink. She just walked on, her boots making soft sounds in the sand. The next morning, during a long-range calibration drill, the outpost set up a 1,000-yard target in unstable wind. Most missed. Thompson didn't. He bragged that confidence was more important than sight alignment. When Blake walked by, a private asked if she was allowed to shoot. Thompson barked she'd have better luck calculating the wind with a compass and a prayer. That evening, alone in the back lot where the generator's hum masked all other sounds, Blake took apart her M110 in silence. It was hers, not base-issued. Old, customized, scarred from years of abuse and rebuilt like a machine with a soul. The stock showed wear patterns that spoke of countless hours in prone position. The barrel had been professionally recrowned, and every component had been selected with purpose. She polished the bolt carrier group with a cloth that had the name Rodriguez sewn into the edge in fading blue thread. No one knew who Rodriguez was. No one asked. But Blake's fingers traced the name with reverence, like touching a sacred relic. She recorded temperatures, pressure shifts, sketched the ridgelines in a small notebook with worn leather covers. Not for show, just routine. The pages were filled with precise handwriting, wind charts, ballistic calculations written in the margins. Years of experience compressed into data points and observations that would mean nothing to most, but everything to those who understood the language of long-range precision. Lieutenant Davis, the only one who ever greeted her with a nod, started noticing. When the impossible shot challenge was posted on the wireboard, a 1,200-yard cold-bore attempt at dawn with no spotter, Thompson claimed it before anyone else could. "Let's remind the rookies what a real shot looks like," he barked. At sunrise, Blake stood at the edge of the range, silent. Not in line, just watching. Thompson missed 3 times. The last round pinged wide and lodged into a dune with a puff of wasted powder. Wind had shifted. Everyone saw it. No one adjusted. Davis stepped forward and said simply, "Let her try." Thompson laughed. "Let the paper pusher embarrass herself. This range doesn't need a charity shot." The senior officer shrugged. "Rules say it's open. 1 shot. Let's see what she's got." And so Blake knelt, slow and unhurried, like someone setting a table for something sacred. The morning light caught the worn fabric of her uniform, highlighting patches where rank insignia had been removed and reattached, where fabric had been mended with careful stitches. She adjusted the elevation, tapped the glass twice, a ritual she'd performed 1,000 times before, and breathed. The air around her felt like glass stretching, the entire base holding its breath. Even the wind seemed to pause, waiting. The trigger broke with the precision of a watchmaker's tool. The bullet flew on a perfect arc, carrying with it years of training, muscle memory, and something deeper, an understanding that went beyond technique. Silence stretched like a held breath, then a faint metal ping echoed across the desert. Clean, central, absolute. The mannequin's forehead now bore a quarter-sized crater, the steel target behind it ringing like a bell. No wind error, no tremble, just execution. The bullet had found its mark with surgical precision, as if guided by an invisible hand. No one spoke for a long time. The silence was profound, pregnant with recognition and respect grudgingly earned. She stood, packed her rifle, and walked off, without waiting for anyone's face to catch up to what had just happened. And behind her, the silence was louder than any applause. That was the first time someone asked, "Who is she?" And the first time Captain Thompson didn't have an answer. The transformation. They called it the wreck and drill on the briefing schedule, a sterile title that hid the weight it carried. But for everyone on Forward Base Phoenix, it was something else entirely. It was the first time a training scenario had been built, not on bravado, not on hierarchy, but around one woman's mind, Staff Sergeant Sarah Blake. When the colonel had named her range chief liaison, a few eyebrows had lifted, but not in challenge, not anymore. By now, the legend of her impossible shot, her wind-mapping intuition, and her ability to silence a crowd without raising her voice had soaked into the bones of the outpost like oil into sand. She was no longer the quiet one by the supply crates or the ghost with the tattered boonie. She was the anchor. The question was no longer, "Who is she?" It had become, "What can we learn before she leaves?" But Blake never seemed interested in teaching in the conventional way. She refused podiums, never gave a lecture. Instead, she gave time. Hours under the sun with recruits trying to find stillness in their scopes. Nights with junior NCOs deciphering the pressure changes on old barometric maps. Long walks along the perimeter, just listening to the way silence moved. Her range wasn't a place to shoot. It became a place to see. The final test. The final drill wasn't meant to prove anything, at least not to her. But fate, or maybe inevitability, had different plans. A visiting coalition general from the European Command had arrived unannounced, accompanied by aides, armor, and arrogance. He brought a rifle team with him, Polish, French, German, and suggested with a smile too wide to be friendly that they engage in a little cross-training demonstration. There was an edge to his tone, as if saying, "Let's see if the myth matches the math." Blake agreed without pause, not to prove him wrong, but because she knew the truth doesn't fear scrutiny. The competition would be straightforward. 5 targets, 5 distances, unpredictable wind, 3 rounds per shooter. One shot would be chosen randomly by an external evaluator to be taken cold. No prep, no wind test, no ranging glass. That impossible shot, only this time live on record and witnessed by a half-dozen brass who still wore tradition like armor and skepticism like a badge. The range was cleared by noon. The sun hung like a slow blade in the sky, when Blake moved like a cautious breath. The coalition shooters went first. Disciplined, tight, good. Their grouping was precise, their reloads clean. Applause followed. Then came Blake's turn. No music, no fanfare, just her walk, even, deliberate, silent. She didn't wear a dress uniform, didn't clean her boots, didn't even wipe down the battered M110 that had become as much legend as she had. She wore the same sun-fed boonie, the same unbranded gloves, the same cracked watch she never seemed to check. When she lay prone, the entire line seemed to inhale and forget to breathe. Her first 2 shots rang out clean, tight, surgical. But then the evaluator spoke. The 3rd shot, the random cold shot, would be taken from an alternate location, one no one had tested. The South Tower, 30 feet above the main deck with crosswinds slicing across a broken ravine. It wasn't a challenge, it was a dare. Blake didn't flinch. She climbed the tower without looking back, rifle slung low, boots scuffing metal rungs. At the top, she unwrapped a cloth bundle containing a single folded wind chart from the day before, weather that no longer applied, and tucked it beneath her arm like a ritual. The crowd waited. Cameras were set. The general leaned forward. And Blake, without a word, laid down, clicked her scope twice, and stilled. She didn't measure. She didn't test. She simply knew. The trigger broke with a sound soft as breath, almost lost in the morning air. And a second later, 1,100 yards away, the final target, a half-silhouetted steel plate tucked in partial shadow behind a rocky outcropping, rang out with a high metallic ping that echoed off the canyon walls. Dead center. The bullet had threaded through shifting winds, over uneven terrain, to find its mark with mathematical precision. The quiet that followed was immediate and absolute. It wasn't awe, it was surrender. The kind of silence that falls when everyone present realizes they've witnessed something beyond ordinary skill, something that crosses into the realm of art. Even the general rose slowly and saluted, his expression transformed from skepticism to respect. She didn't return it. She only stood, dusted off her knees with the same methodical care she applied to everything, and descended the ladder with the stillness of someone who had done what needed to be done and nothing more. The speech later that evening, in the mess tent, the colonel requested she say a few words. The room was full of officers and enlisted, foreign liaisons. Blake stood, looked across the gathered faces, and finally spoke. "There's only ever one shot that matters," she said, voice low, unwavering. "Not the one they watch, not the one they film, the one you take when no one thinks you're ready. That's the truth. You aim quiet, you breathe, and you let the silence do what pride never can." She stepped down. No applause followed, just a hush that carried more weight than clapping ever could. The legacy. In the days after, a plaque was mounted on the South Tower. "Read the air, SSG Sarah Blake." Beneath it, etched into the metal, "One shot, one truth." Blake didn't stay much longer. She requested reassignment to a quiet post somewhere near the coast where she could train without fanfare. She left a rifle case behind, locked, unclaimed, and taped a note to it, "For the next one who listens." Davis was named her successor, promoted with orders to preserve her doctrine, but no manual was printed, no videos made. Her notebook remained in the range locker, wrapped in canvas, opened only by those who knew how to read between lines and through wind. Back home, Blake settled into a small cabin near the ocean, far from barracks and banners. Every year, on the day of the shot, a package arrived from the outpost. Photos of new recruits grouped around the plaque, range reports marked Blake Method, and handwritten letters simply signed, "Still listening." She never replied, but she always read them. And sometimes on misty mornings, she'd stand on her porch, rifleless, hat pulled low, watching the trees sway in rhythm, smiling just slightly because respect, like wind, doesn't need to be seen to be felt. And so her legacy stood not in medals or ceremonies, but in the way soldiers learned to wait before they spoke, measure before they moved, and aim not for praise, but for truth. Staff Sergeant Sarah Blake taught them that stillness isn't weakness, it's precision. That silence isn't absence, it's presence. And that one shot, taken at the right time, with nothing but certainty, can echo louder than 1,000 commands ever could. She never told them who she'd been before, but they didn't need her past to believe in what she left behind. The range still bears her name, the tower still catches the wind, and if you stand there at sunrise, breathe deep, and aim quiet, they say you can still hear it. This is true veteran stories, where courage isn't measured by volume, but by the silence that follows. Like and subscribe for more stories of the warriors who serve in shadow.